Okay, so I just talked to a Girl Scout troop of about 14 fourth graders, and it was a ton of fun to talk to them about what a scientist does and what I do as a scientist in Antarctica, and also talk about phytoplankton. So I just wanted to share with you guys what I had presented to them. And at the end of the um, talk, which had a ton of questions, also, we made a little phytoplankton net out of nylon stocking and a plastic bottle. And I will leave instructions for how to do that as well, which was a very fun activity that maybe took 20 minutes to complete. So, hi, I'm Allison. I am a scientist, and this is a picture of me in Antarctica standing next to a boat. But I'm also near the water and I study the ocean, which makes me an oceanographer. I also study the living things in the ocean, which makes me a biologist. And I also am a polar scientist because I specialize in the cold places in the world. I also am a boat driver because I can drive this little boat that I'm standing next to. And I am what we call a polar guide because I can take travelers that come to Antarctica in my little boat and I can talk to them about the environment that we're seeing. And this actually makes me a teacher. So I teach people what I know about Antarctica and about the life that's down there in the ocean and why the environment is the way it is. And I also figure that I'm an explorer because I am very far away from home and exploring these places that are so remote in our world. And I also am a student because I actually am still going to school. I am in graduate school getting my PhD to, to become an expert in polar biology of the oceans. So I want to tell you guys about the coolest place on Earth. And before I talk too much about where this is, I just want to know how many people know where in the world are the coolest places. So some of you might know of the Arctic and the Antarctic. Does anybody know what the differences are between the two? So this is where people will say the animals or the fact that the Arctic is ocean surrounded by land and the Antarctic is land surrounded by ocean. Also, the word Arctic means bear. So the polar bears live in the Arctic. And the Antarctic means no bear. So there are no bears living in Antarctica. Instead, because it's an ocean, you have seabirds and marine animals. So we consider that to be where the penguins live. So this is the coldest, driest, windiest place on Earth. There's storms that make the wind blow really fast, and the temperatures drop to the most coldest temperatures ever recorded on Earth. And it's the driest, which means even though there's a lot of snow, there's actually not a lot of precipitation. So there's not much rain or snow coming from the atmosphere down to the land, which technically makes it a desert. And of course, if some people are concerned about going down there and how cold it is, we dress for this extreme cold weather. We put on our snow gear, our snow pants, our waterproof boots. I like to wear a lot of jackets and fleece and puffy jackets and my ski jacket that keeps the wind off of me. I also wear a face covering to keep the wind off my face, snow goggles or sunglasses if it's a sunny day, and my hat and a waterproof backpack because we're going to be in that little boat that you saw me standing next to earlier. So now we're ready to go. We're going to start, since we're here in North America, we're going to leave from North America and we're going to take a plane and we're going to travel to South America. And when we get to South America, we're going to go to the very tippy point at the end down there. And then you see we have this ocean across. So we can sometimes fly in this little plane here, which looks like a penguin, or we can take a boat. So if anybody gets seasick, I get seasick. But there's medicine you can take to make yourself feel better. Even as an oceanographer, you can get seasick, and we'll go to Antarctica. Now, if you're coming down on a science project, then you can also take a military craft. So this airplane here is a Hercules. It has ski pontoons to land on the ice runway. And we'll get out of the airplane and we'll get into this big giant truck. And that truck is called Ivan the Terrabus. And you see this person here for scale is almost as big as the wheel. The wheel is almost as big as the person. So this bus will take us to the science research station. So this is, you can see the people up here on the hill. This is one of the United States research stations called McMurdo. And you can see the town below. So this is where scientists live and sleep and work and eat and do science. And then way back here, you can see a little ship, and the ship will come in on this lane here and come into the port and deliver supplies, equipment, food, and research. More researchers will go onto the ships. So I actually got on one of these ships. This is the United States Palmer, Nathaniel B. Palmer, and I spent 53 days in the ocean investigating this brown stuff. So does anybody know what this brown stuff might be? And this is where a lot of them already knew what algae was and phytoplankton, which was really exciting. So I say, yeah, the ocean gets so cold that it will freeze into what we call pancake ice. Looks like little pancakes. And all that brown stuff are the little microscopic plants. We call them plants. They're called phytoplankton. And we look at how are they growing? What do they do when they die? Do they make it into the clouds above? Are they being eaten? Who are they being eaten by? And we answer these kind of questions. Also, we can come down on different kinds of ships. We have the research ship here, but if you're brave enough, you can come down on a sailboat. You can also come down on a bigger ship. If you get seasick, this might be a better option for you. And then when we want to go explore the land, we can take those little boats that you saw me in earlier in. So we can jump in this little boat and go visit a penguin colony. This is a video of the ocean when it gets so cold that the ocean actually starts to freeze, and you can see that the ocean is moving, and that's called swell, and it looks very slushy on the top. So this is Cape Washington in the Ross Sea. You can see the wind blowing off the top of the mountain there. And that is when salt water can freeze. This gets down to -2 Celsius. So that's really cold. So in the winter, you have that ocean that's freezing, and it makes Antarctica look a lot bigger. And then in the summer, when the sunlight comes out and it starts to melt all of that ice away, then the ice shrinks. So you don't have as much of the ocean that is frozen. But you also have that land part of Antarctica is actually covered in ice. So these ice rivers are called, and they'll say glaciers if they know. So these glaciers are like frozen rivers slowly moving down on the land. And then they reach the ocean here, and you see what happens. Look, it's not straight. It's actually a crooked line. And then you see some of these break off, and then they're big chunks of ice floating in the ocean. So does anybody know what those are called? That's right, those are icebergs. And this is where some of the kids talked about the Titanic. So the Titanic ran into an iceberg, and the icebergs were broken off from the glacier that was on land. And sometimes they can be so big. I don't have a person here for scale, but you can also see that as the snow falls, it will layer and it will start to compress into the glacier. And then that's why when the glacier breaks off into the ocean, we see those lines. And scientists can actually take a sample of this and an ice core and then look at the Earth's past climate history because of all of these layers. So I talked about the non-living things. Now let's talk about the animals that are down there. So this is a picture showing all the animals, and it's got penguins and seabirds, and it has ice, and it has seals and fish, and it has a big baleen whale. And then it of course has the krill, or these little shrimp-like creatures, and they're all eating phytoplankton. So I put all these green phytoplankton on the top of the krill. So we're going to talk a little bit more about these guys. So you actually have orca whales down there. So orca whales When they come down to Antarctica, they can bring their babies down to feed. And for some reason down in Antarctica, these whales get covered in brown color. Do you know what that brown color might be? Phytoplankton. So there's a type of phytoplankton that attaches to the skin of the orca. And I don't think scientists really know why this happens. They just know that it does happen. When the orcas go back to the equator or to the tropics, after they're done eating down in Antarctica, then all of this brown will fall off their skin. The phytoplankton will die and the orcas will just be black and white again. But you can tell how long this baby has been down in Antarctica based on how much diatom is growing on its skin. You also have baleen whales. This is a humpback whale. This is video from my friend who saw a humpback whale, and you can see these pink little things flying around, floating around. Those are krill. So this is a big swarm of krill. It looks like a tasty snack from the point of view of the whale. And if you had a finger length, they're about that size. And you can see that they have these little legs and these combs, and they just comb the water. Now we have some penguins. Does anybody know what kind of penguins these are? Emperor penguins. So this was actually a trip we went down with a researcher named Jerry Koyman at Scripps Oceanography. What kind of penguins are these? That's me. Those are human penguins. So these emperor penguins are very curious. They don't have any fear. You see them waddling away. They'll slide on their belly. Researchers can put trackers on these penguins that will tell them how they have to go to the water to find their food. So they'll tell them how deep they dive. They'll tell them what their heart rate is. They'll tell them how fast they were swimming. They can get all of this data to learn more about how the penguins live down there. This footage was taken by another scientist, David Ic. And then on the peninsula of Antarctica, we have 3 other kinds of penguins that you will find most often. So we have one called a gentoo. It has a little headband, white headband around its head. We have an adelie. It's a black head with a white ring around its eye. And then we have the chin strap. So it's a penguin with a strap under its chin. And these penguins also eat krill. So they are going out looking for this same food source. So we've talked a lot about the penguins and the whales. What about the seals? So we actually have fur seals, what-else seals, crab eater seals, and leopard seals. And the leopard seals, look at the teeth on that leopard seal. So they have those big jaws in the front, and those are to eat penguin. But then you can also see the ones that kind of look like they'd fit together like a comb. That's because they can also eat krill. So they're able to take a big mouthful and strain the water out and have that big tasty krill meal in their mouth. All of those also look for eating krill and fish and squid and a lot of other animals, but we in science oftentimes keep the story very short and only talk about krill. So here's our food web in Antarctica, and I haven't talked yet about the most important thing. Anybody guess? What are the krill eating? What do they eat? You see that green stomach? Phytoplankton. That's right. The krill are selectively choosing to eat certain types of phytoplankton. And here I have pictured diatoms that I took under the microscope. This particular diatom is called corythron because of the crown of thorn looking things around its ends. And if you took a picture of that brown ice that I showed earlier, it would look like this. It's a sea ice diatom. And of course, these are high-powered microscope images. I did not take these. These are from online, and it's a compilation of all the different types of phytoplankton you might find. You have some that are covered in wood or cellulose. You have some covered in glass, silica. You have some that have tails or flagella, and they can swim around, and they love fresh water. You have some that are covered in chalk or like a calcium. There's so much variety of phytoplankton, and the krill want to choose the ones that they like to eat. So we get in our little boat and we're going to take a phytoplankton net and we're going to drag that net through the water. We're then going to have this nice soupy golden green mixture that's full of phytoplankton. We can strain all the water out of that and we are left with this little disc of phytoplankton. If we were to take that and put it under the microscope, we'd see images like this. So this is all different species of diatoms. And you can see that they're colored different colors because of the pigment that they use. So just like trees and plants at home, I have a plant right here. Just like these are green because of the pigment that lets them use sunlight to make energy. So are the phytoplankton brown or green or gold because of the pigments that are in the cells. And one of those is called chlorophyll, which you might have heard of. So just like we have different food available different times of the year, if we look at spring or summer, fall and winter, we can grow different types of vegetables and fruits. It's the same idea for what the krill are eating in Antarctica. Different times of the year, you have different types of phytoplankton. And so if you're a baby krill, you might want to be under the sea ice and you might want to be eating these different smaller diatoms. But then if you're a big adult krill, you can go into the ocean and you can feed on other phytoplankton that are bigger, that are just floating around. So that's an important thing to also understand. So you might have heard that Antarctica was just in the news for having the warmest temperature recorded. 65 degrees recorded at one of the research stations down there. And why do you think this might matter for Antarctica? So this is where a lot of them just say ice. Yeah, ice melts when it gets warm. So Antarctica is covered in 98% ice. And that is, of all the ice in the world, 90% of the world's ice. And also because that ice is made from falling snowflakes, which is fresh water. When it freezes, that's 68% of the world's fresh water. So if this is melting, all of that ice melting from the land is coming into the ocean. And if that fresh water mixes with the ocean salty water, then you might change the phytoplankton. And if the phytoplankton change, then maybe the krill are going to change. And if the krill change, then maybe the food might change for these whales and penguins and seals. This is a short little video I like to share to give you context.
The Antarctic holds magic in its waters, and a team of scientists are determined to uncover the mysteries that lie within.
But to understand what makes this ecosystem come alive,
scientists need your help.
Fjord Phyto is a citizen science project that engages passengers by collecting phytoplankton from the ocean.
Phytoplankton are microscopic algae that form the foundation of most marine webs.
And by looking at how phytoplankton communities change over the seasons, researchers are studying how it might relate to melting glaciers in Antarctica.
Because to better protect an ecosystem, we need to better understand it. And by protecting the microscopic heroes of the Antarctic,
we can protect the life that depends on them.
Because conservation is not an I.
It's a we.
So this project works with the travelers that come down to Antarctica and the guides that work on the ships, and everybody's helping to collect phytoplankton during the daylight summer season. And it takes a lot of people to help get this information. And then when we get back on board the ship, we can use a microscope to look at all the different phytoplankton we're seeing. And then I can look in Martina, my colleague in Argentina, can also look and convert all this data into papers and graphs and share the results with people. So I actually am able to take some of those samples that are collected. So remember that disc that was green, so that can get rolled up like a burrito and that sticks into a tube and then that gets frozen. And then that frozen tube gets sent to me. And when I get it in the lab, I can take all of the phytoplankton out and extract the genetic information inside. So I can see different samples and how many phytoplankton there were. I can also see what species were there. So instead of looking under a microscope, I can use the DNA to understand individuals. And then also Of course, scientists like to write up all this information and we publish it in different journals, science journals. We also try to write stories online or blogs. We try to be active on social media to share with people the work that we're doing. We also go to conferences to talk to other scientists, and we make fun little videos like you just saw with the help of filmmakers. And these are some images that were taken under a high-powered microscope, which we can also publish. And so I just hope that the next time you look out at the ocean and think about Antarctica, you don't only think about the big animals like the penguins and the whales and the seals, but that you might think about the krill. And then what else? The phytoplankton. Yes, that is what's running this whole marine ecosystem. And it's the same other places in the world. So other places in the world that you see a lot of animals, they can live there because of phytoplankton, or this microscopic plant-like algae that's living in the water. So they're very important, very little, but very big. So I also told you that I was different types of scientists professionally, but I wanted to share one more thing with you guys, and that we don't only do science, we also like to be active. So this is a picture of me jumping in the water in Antarctica. There are people who go to Antarctica to go scuba diving to get information about under the water. Scientists, if they're going out exploring, they also like to run. A lot of people like to bike or go camping. And sometimes on the ships, you have people who play music or guitar or saxophone. There's also artists on board who like to paint or draw the landscape or the penguins or things under the microscope. And Antarctica is very international. So you actually have a need to speak different languages. So you can speak Spanish or French or German or Filipino or Russian. And of course, science is a lot of hard work, and we definitely work hard, but we also make sure to have fun and play, because you have to keep your spirits alive when you're down in this place that doesn't have all the normal things you're used to back at home. So it's very amazing. It's hard work. It's fun. And I hope you all learned something new about Antarctica today. Thank you for listening. So there's actually an activity we can do that is making phytoplankton net at home. So I'm going to put the instructions for that next.